Impeachment articles are being drafted for United States Attorney General Pam Bondi. Referrals for criminal investigations are being considered, as well as contempt of Congress. Representatives Thomas Massey and Khanna, the ones who authored the Epstein Files Transparency Act, are holding the DOJ's feet to the fire when it comes to releasing the files in accordance with the law. People are fed up with soft action and congressional hearings, where Bondi and others have used that platform to filibuster, lie, misdirect, and personally attack those asking questions in order to avoid accountability. People want action. They're tired of seeing criminals in this administration act as if they are above the law, and if there are no consequences for their criminal actions, then it has become apparent to the American people that these criminals really are above the law. As I'm sure that you've seen by now, the files that have been released by the DOJ have been almost completely redacted, as pointed out here by Jake Tapper.
As much of this as possible.
Talk about blacking out. I don't know if I can get a close-up of my phone. This is one of the documents that the Justice Department released. It's 100 pages.
Right,
This is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see. It's all black. It's just 100 pages of redaction. That's the transparency we're getting here.
Thomas Massey also points this out and goes further into the specifics, where he goes over 3 different attachments. 1, the Epstein Files Transparency Act and the language that's included in it. 2, a statement from Fox Digital. And 3, the existing criminal statute for obstruction of justice under which they may bring charges. In the law that they passed, the pertinent section goes over the prohibited grounds for withholding. No record shall be withheld, delayed, or redacted on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity, including to any government official, public figure, or foreign dignitary. And then you have Fox News reporting that the Justice Department redacted names and identifiers of victims, but they have also applied the same redaction standards to politically exposed individuals and government officials. And then the criminal statute that covers obstruction of justice goes into whoever knowingly conceals, covers up, with the intent to impede, instruct, or influence the proper administration of any matter shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 20 years, or both. So it's up to 20 years imprisonment for anyone that obstructs justice in this matter, the way that the DOJ has done so. So in response to Thomas Massey and Khanna indicating that they were writing up articles of impeachment as well as looking at other possible forms of punishment, they got a response from the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who was the prior criminal attorney for Donald Trump during his 2024 New York criminal trial, where he was convicted on 34 counts, that is now the Deputy AG of the Department of Justice. So Thomas Massey posts part of the letter that Todd Blanche had written them, trying to explain why there were so many redactions. So he says, compare the language of the Epstein Files Transparency Act directing the DOJ to provide internal communications regarding their decisions against the DOJ letter to Congress asserting privilege to omit materials related to decisions because they weren't specified by law. And he basically says that they are flouting the law. So Massey in his post goes on to point out the language again in the Transparency Act, where they shall make publicly available in a searchable and downloadable format all unclassified records, documents, communications, and investigative materials in the possession of the Department of Justice, including FBI and U.S. Attorney's offices that relate to, number 7, internal DOJ communications, including emails, memos, meeting notes, concerning decisions to charge, not charge, investigate, or decline to investigate Epstein or his associates. Now, in response, this is what Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche had written to Congress. In addition to the bases for withholding or redacting under the Act, the department has added additional terms and withheld and redacted a limited amount of information. It was not limited, it was extensive, otherwise covered by various privileges, including deliberative process privilege, work product privilege, and attorney-client privilege. So they just added their own terms, they added their own reasons for withholding and redacting a whole bunch of other information That was not outlined in the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And that is against the law, which is why Khanna and Thomas Massey are looking to file articles of impeachment, among other things, against Pam Bondi and possibly other officials in the Department of Justice or in the administration. And here is Thomas Massey on Face the Nation this morning addressing that exact issue.
Here's why we shouldn't be optimistic that Blanche or Bondi are going to release these things. They sent a 6-page memo to Congress and said they cited pre-existing laws as reasons that they weren't going to follow our law. For instance, our law requires them to release information regardless of embarrassment, but they are trying to say that a previous law prevails when it doesn't. Common sense says it doesn't. The Privacy Act doesn't protect them from that. And then also, as Rose said, internal communications, they're using a FOIA standard that doesn't apply because our law already says they have to give us internal communications.
And in terms of the redactions, what the Deputy Attorney General said is that they were abiding by your law, and also a judge in New York had ordered them to listen to victims. So they're claiming that information that they had initially even published Friday, they had to pull down because they were trying to protect victims. You don't sound convinced that they are abiding by this intent.
No, they are not abiding, and all 3 judges who released the grand jury material said that our law trumps the prior law. That's just common sense, Law School 101, yet Todd Blanche is using a different theory that wouldn't survive first contact with any court, which is he's trying to say that prior laws override our law. That's not the way this works.
So then if Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, the Department of Justice, if they are not going to release the files with minimal redactions, then someone has to hold their feet to the fire. And there's a number of ways in which they can hold them accountable. One of those ways would be contempt of Congress.
Oh, absolutely. Look, people have talked about, and by the way, Todd Blanche is the face of this, but it's really the Attorney General's office, Pam Bondi, who is responsible. And there are several ways to get at this. Some take longer, some are shorter. The quickest way, and I think most expeditious way to get justice for these victims is to bring inherent contempt against Pam Bondi, and that doesn't require going through the courts, and give her, and basically Khanna and I are talking about and drafting that right now.
Now, I personally think that criminal charges should also be brought. There should be criminal charges in a court of law where they have to prove to a court, to a judge, what their actual actions were, what their intent was, what their internal communications were regarding that. I think that in a sense that contempt of Congress might be, as he said, the most expeditious way to do so. However, there needs to be other consequences as well. There need to be more consequences, because if there are not, and it's only contempt of Congress, not that that's a small thing, but we're just not seeing the same effect of the law as applied to normal citizens, applied here to congressmen, to the administration, and to others. So there should be more consequences than just the contempt of Congress. In response to that, Donald Trump's personal prior criminal defense attorney, who is now the Deputy Attorney General of the Department of Justice, responded to the idea that Khanna and Massey were looking into contempt, criminal proceedings, referrals, and other types of punishment for not following the law.
Mr. Blanche, you talk about the reaction from Capitol Hill. Let me allow you to respond to some of it. Congressman Thomas Massey and Khanna, the authors of the Epstein bill, say the partial release of files failed to comply with the law. They say they are considering looking into the possibility of impeachment proceedings, contempt, even criminal referrals for obstruction of justice for DOJ officials. Do you take these threats seriously?
Not even a little bit. Bring it on. We are doing everything we're supposed to be doing to comply with this statute. And Congressman Massey and these other congressmen that are coming out speaking negatively about Director Patel and the Attorney General have no idea what they're talking about. They know the work that we're going through. They know what we're doing to protect victims. I mean, just think about what we're doing. You're talking about 1 million or so pages of documents. Virtually all of them contain victim information. So listen, the idea that Attorney General Bondi would ever let a single piece of paper go out of this department that contains victim information is something they know we won't do. And the fact that they're threatening to impeach.
By the way, they already did. They released information with victim information on there that's blowing up all over the place. So that's not true either.
Her for protecting victims is a reflection of where their head's at. It's not a reflection of this department. We are complying with the statute. We will continue to comply with the statute. And if by complying with the statute, we don't produce everything on Friday, we produce things next week and the week after, that's still compliance with the statute. There is well-settled law, as they should know, that in a case like this, where we're required to produce within a certain amount of time, but also comply with other laws like redacting information, that very much trumps, redacting information very much trumps some deadline in the statute.
So if you want to see information regarding the fact that they did release a victim's information, Brian Allen has reported on this, that the DOJ redacted Donald Trump's name, but failed to redact the name of an actual Epstein survivor. A Jane Doe who reported Epstein to the FBI in 2009 had her identity exposed in the DOJ's document dump. So the idea that Todd Blanche says that Pam Bondi would not let a single document be released by the DOJ with victim information on it is patently false. They absolutely did. It goes on to say that she immediately sent a letter to the DOJ after discovering that her name had been left unprotected. Let that sink in. They shielded a powerful politician. They exposed a victim. This is a moral failure and a cover-up in plain sight. However, they did pull this document from the file dump. As you can see, there is Donald Trump here. There's Donald Trump here. There's an entire drawer full of Donald Trump pictures. You can clearly see that this is him. So they're claiming that they pulled this file because there are women in the picture. I'm telling you, there's women in other pictures that they released. They're saying that they have not confirmed whether or not these are victims or not. They're just saying that they're potential victims. And so they had to absolutely pull the file for safety concerns. But we've seen other files where Donald Trump's name is redacted, and in no way does that go towards protecting the victims. And here's Todd Blanche responding to the removal of that file from the Epstein document dump.
Mr. Blanche, I want to follow up with you on what you just said. You were referencing the 15 files released Friday. They disappeared from DOJ's website yesterday, including this photo of what looks like a desk with a drawer open containing photos of Donald Trump. Just to be very clear, to put a fine point on it, why were these files taken down? You're saying it was at the direction of a judge?
Well, you can see in that photo, there's photographs of women. And so we learned after releasing that photograph that there were concerns about those women and the fact that we had put that photo up. So we pulled that photo down. It has nothing to do with President Trump. There are dozens of photos of President Trump already released to the public, seeing him with Mr. Epstein. He has said that in the 90s and early 2000s, he socialized with him. So the absurdity of us pulling down a photo, a single photo, because President Trump was in it, is laughable.
Yeah, so that's absolutely not true. We have multiple examples of Donald Trump being removed from the files. We all know that it's true, but we have proof of it. We have evidence that it actually exists, that his name specifically, along with other names of people that are powerful people, prominent people, their names are being removed. The names of the perpetrators, not just the victims, but of the perpetrators, are actually being removed from the files, and there's evidence all over the place of that. What he doesn't say, those other files released were not by him, were not by the Department of Justice during this time. They were released from the Democratic House Oversight Committee. Those were the things that were released. Prior videos that have surfaced are released. They did not release anything related to Donald Trump. Everything with Donald Trump has been scrubbed from those files. And so the moment that this was noticed that Donald Trump was in those pictures, they removed that file from the Epstein document list immediately. And so, of course, some are pushing back, saying that contempt, it's too early for stuff like that. We don't really need to go down that path. We don't really need to punish people for the blatant overstep in the redactions that have occurred. We don't really need to go down that route. So Khanna spells out exactly why that's an issue. It is an issue for standing up for the victims. It is a slap in the face to the victims what the DOJ has done, and just simply the fact that these are rich and powerful people that are covering for each other and re-victimizing the people who have suffered the most in this case.
Another network this morning, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine said impeachment or contempt, it is premature, Congressman Khanna, and the Deputy Attorney General said bring it on. They don't seem to be taking this very seriously, and if you just don't have the math in the Senate, including at least now this Democratic senator not being convinced, doesn't that sort of show that you're at the limit of pressure?
No, we only need the House for inherent contempt, and we're building a bipartisan coalition, and it would fine Pam Bondi for every day that she's not releasing these documents. I'll tell you why. I've talked to the survivors, why this is such a slap in the face. One of the survivors said they released her name accidentally, but they still have not released the FBI file about the people who abused her at her request. And the problem here is that there are rich and powerful people. We all know this. There are 1,200 victims. They're rich and powerful people who either engaged in this abuse, covered it up, or were on this island. And what the American people want to know is, who are these people? And instead of holding them accountable, Pam Bondi is breaking the law. And this is the corrupt system, the Epstein class that people are sick of. So I believe we're going to get bipartisan support in holding her accountable, and a committee of Congress should determine whether these redactions are justified or not.
And so Ro Khanna goes on to say, for the 119-page document that was almost entirely redacted, of full-on black pages top to bottom, Thomas Massey and I announced that we are bringing inherent contempt against Bondi. The DOJ cowers and then re-releases the 119-page document, now with minimal redactions. Massey and I are different. We do not just do memes or speeches. We take action to fight a corrupt system. And so that's what I think we need more of in this country, is action. Decisive, quick, and concise action. Because I'm telling you, any delays that continue to occur, even from congressmen like this, just looks like that they're part of it. It looks like they're part of the corruption and the system that has so many Americans angered. They want accountability, and they want it to be swift. They want our congressmen and women to stand up for the American people and to not continue to cover for the rich and powerful in Congress, in America, in our government, and across the board. If you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. You're watching The Matt Balla Show. I'll see you next time.